second. Now those are the ones we're using in there. Yeah, these are rigged for this.
Hey, we got.
Alright, I better label this before I forget.
Yep.
Alright, saline. Okay, so all the rest of these are just in case something else happens. We got all that.
Take yours, bro. You'll be alright. Okay. Well done.
What's going on, Mike?
Shit! Send a tissue. Dr. Vane.
Governor?
Joe.
I need a decision right now about whether to proceed with backup chemicals.
Joe?
In the United States, there has been 1,475 capital executions since 1976. The government must outlaw the death penalty to create a more civil and humane society. The character Perry from In Cold Blood is a demonstration of why criminals do not deserve to be executed. Recent events will exploit the flaws of capital murders to show how it is unjust, and information on confinement will be used to explain why prison is worse than death and refute my view and back it up with facts and evidence. In the novel In Cold Blood, Perry is portrayed by Capote as a sympathetic figure that killed the Clutters because he did not have proper socialization and guidance in his youth. Perry's execution wasn't justified due to the fact that he was not mentally stable. Perry said he had very little guidance while growing up. He said he had no rule or discipline or anyone to show him right from wrong. Perry came from a rough background. He came from a neglective and abusive household, leaving him to have to grow up and mature on his own, living in a broken down trailer home, living off Hershey Kisses and condensed milk with his 3 siblings.
He started yelling what a greedy, selfish bastard I was. Yelling and yelling until I grabbed his throat. I couldn't stop myself. He tore loose, got a gun. He said, "Look at me, boy. Take a good look, because I'm the last living thing you're ever gonna see."
Perry was also very undereducated. He said, "I finished the 3rd grade," which was the finish. When Perry was young, his father removed him from school, and he never received a formal education again throughout his adolescent and adult life, even though he craved the idea of education. This not only affected his learning skills and intellect, but also stripped the opportunity for him to properly socialize and grow along with kids his own age, leaving him as an adult with the decision-making and social skills of a child. Perry's life events leading up to the Clutters murders is a clear indication of how the death penalty can unfairly rule on a person who didn't have an equal opportunity to learn how to be a productive citizen in society, even though they crave the idea of bettering themselves. On the idea of justification, the odds of an inadvertent death are startling at the least. The United States government should end the death penalty because of the flaws it presents. The punishment is not always humane and can wrongfully take a person's life. Since 1973, 144 people on death row have been exonerated. As a percentage of all death sentences, that's just 1.6%. But if the innocence rate is 4.1%, more than twice the rate of exoneration, the site suggests what most people assumed but dreaded. An untold number of innocent people have been executed. This shows that the government is willing to use a morally questionable punishment when they can't guarantee that every recipient committed the crime. No matter how small the percentage of wrongful terminations occur, even one unjust death is grounds for the complete abolition of the practice. Killing people deemed unsalvageable by the state is wrong to begin with, but accidentally murdering the wrong person is grounds for a revolution of the way we look at this disciplinary action. I cannot see that the execution did anything to enhance public safety, but I was still expected to do my job. We focus on carrying out our responsibilities and leaving everyone involved with as much dignity as possible. Former Superintendent of the Oregon State Penitentiary and Vietnam veteran Seaman Frank Thompson gives his opinion on the 2 most recent executions in the state's history that he carried out. He states that he used to support the death penalty, but doesn't anymore due to his experiences being an executioner. He recited the trauma his staff and other inmates experienced in the overall darkness of capital deaths. This clearly shows the inhumanity of executions. People often forget when executions happen, someone has to carry out the act and take away a part of their humanity. The practice of putting people to death as the highest form of punishment is principally flawed in the current U.S. criminal justice system. Incarceration is a greater form of consequence than dying for most prisoners. South Carolina appellate attorney Joe Savides did everything he could to try to prevent the execution of Michael Pissarro, not necessarily because he believed in his innocence, but because Pissarro wanted to die. Michael Pissarro was charged for the murder of his 2-year-old daughter. He doused his car in gasoline and proceeded to light the car on fire with his daughter in it. Pissarro pleaded guilty to murder and then requested and received the death penalty. Pissarro is just one example of cases where defendants lunging into the arms of the Grim Reaper instead of appealing to the courts. Why is this? In the 35 out of the 38 states, the only alternative punishment is life in prison without parole. As an increasing number of convicts have been volunteering for death, a clear conclusion has become apparent. Criminals prefer a quick out over living out the rest of their lives behind a cold cell. As a death row lawyer who fights to keep his clients alive, I believe life without parole denies the possibility of redemption every bit as much as strapping a murderer to the gurney and filling him with poison. David Rowe is a practicing attorney who specializes in defending clients who are on the chopping block. Rowe stated that in the 2 decades he has been practicing, he has had a number of clients who have asked him to end their appeals and accept death. The article states the reason for this being the clients preferring the circumstances of their death in their own hands rather than being incarcerated for decades without the chance of parole. Although the death penalty can be seen as morally wrong, the majority of citizens in the U.S. support the practice overall. Some people believe that the death penalty can be the only way to punish for extremely violent crimes. For mass murderers, serial killers, and molesters, it can be argued that the only close to equivocal form of justice would be killing someone. If murderers are sentenced to death and executed, potential murderers will think twice before killing for fear of losing their own life. People in society believe that capital murder is a way of keeping criminals in check the same way each branch of government works in keeping the others in check. The prevailing theme is that if the worst offenders get executed, it will deter like-minded individuals from carrying out the highest forms of crime in American society. In conclusion, the moral boundaries our society must cross to end another life outweighs the pros of what we call justice in our criminal system. However, there is a solution to this problem. By writing and calling to your government officials, you can help be part of the change that ends the death penalty. Throughout this presentation, you have seen the vast amount of reasons the death penalty is wrong. The weight of the loss of our humanity, the many misguided mistakes, the far worse conditions of prison, and the reasons behind people's wants for these killings to be in place in our society. Who says it's your decision who goes and when? Is it right for humans to play God?